just thank you very much for inviting me to join with you this evening. I was very excited when I heard about it. When I hear about Beckett and the Waiting for Godot being shown here, being put on here at the PNCA in January, I just went, yes, brilliant, that is fantastic. Ireland opened our embassy in Islamabad in 2024, so we're relatively new. We're the 100th overseas, the 100th diplomatic mission. And I suppose what I want to share is how often, how surprised and how delighted I am when I meet people here and they refer to Irish literature and they refer to Beckett, they refer to Yeats, they refer to our great heroes and heroines from the literary side. But I'm excited to hear how Waiting for Godot was received in Pakistan, in Islamabad, how it was received in Urdu, and how the audience engaged. Like for me, you can't beat a play. It's a bit like a happening. You bring an audience, you bring the players together, and it's an experience that people have. So, Max, what you were saying there about the commonalities of the human experience, the things that join us, the things that link us. So I'm really excited, Ahmed, to hear from you, to hear how it went down. And I look forward to seeing more Beckett staged in Pakistan and Islamabad. So thank you very much for asking me to join in this conversation, to listen into the conversation. I'm here to learn. So thank you, Max, and back to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Federico, I'm going to introduce myself, Marta, because she's the boss, okay? And then I will definitely the mic to you. So, Marta, thank you. We made it. I'm very happy and proud that we made it, okay? And if you want to introduce to people who might be not so familiar as us, okay, to TCF, if you want to say something about why we are here and why we think for a number of reasons, not only the work-related ones, okay, the TCF is our heroes in the end. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Max. Thanks for having us, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Marta Righetti, and I represent the Citizens Foundation, where I lead the TCF Europe operations from Milan. I think it's very interesting to see this, link between Ireland, Italy, let's say Europe more in general, with Pakistan. Of course, as TCF Europe CEO, I really feel connected to this idea of no borders, and I think this is true for culture, same as it is for education. At the Citizens Foundation, we do believe that change begins with education, and our mission is in fact to break down barriers of class, of privilege, and create agents of change through quality education. For us, agents of change are children, in this case, who are accessing education, and they're not changing their own lives, but they are becoming, game changers for their communities, their families. So, they're well-rounded individuals. And in fact, our name is the Citizens Foundation, because we work with the citizens of the future. Why Pakistan? Very briefly, as some of you may know, Pakistan is home to 25 million children who don't access education. And this is our why. We want to challenge that. And we believe these are not just numbers. They're numbers we actually really struggle to maybe relate to, but these are, lives, and they are literally children waiting for an opportunity. So back in the mid-90s, five men from Karachi, they were entrepreneurs in their mid-40s, decided they wanted to be part of the solution rather than the problem. And they set up the first 5 TCF schools in Karachi. So TCF is a Pakistani born and bred organization and indigenous to Pakistan. And they decided to find, again, a possible solution to this major educational crisis. And they had this idea in mind that, the fact that they started with 5 schools, they wanted to find a model that could be replicable and, scalable to all of Pakistan. So first thing they thought of was that they shouldn't be poor schools for poor children, but rather, beautiful schools, well, lit, spacious, safe, with toilets for the girls, and brought into the communities. Of course, we are working with the most underprivileged communities of Pakistan, so bringing the schools to the kids was fundamental, to improve access. Then they wanted to reflect the community out there. And from day one, they wanted to go for co-education. So they gave themselves the goal of having 50% girls enrolled. And as this wasn't happening in the first few years, they then started to employ only women as faculty. So our principals, our teachers are all female, which makes us the first employer of women in the private sector in Pakistan to this date. And then, the focus has always been on quality. And I think we will discuss then, what drives us in values later tonight. But I think, again, the idea that we're not talking about children as recipients of notions, but, agents, is what has driven us in terms of curriculum, creating our own textbooks, and then involving the communities outside the schools. So other than schools, we now have some community development programs around in the communities where we operate. One of them is a program for adult literacy called Hagai, which won the UNESCO Confucius Prize for Literacy in 2017. And so from these 5 schools, we're now running over 2,000 schools across Pakistan. And we enroll 320,000 kids, like half of them are girls, in the country, which if you think it's in 30 years, like a scale that, it's even difficult to grasp. And what I feel it's possible, like what made it possible is that it's an organization that is very rooted in values. And personally, as I know the founders, and I'm involved day to day with TCF, I think that it's what makes us a unique organization that, again, from the idea of 5 people to now run a movement of thousands of volunteers all across the globe, including in Ireland and Italy and Europe, is because, again, we're very value driven. We believe in human dignity. We believe in, slow and positive change and, equity. So talking about change and scale up, this is what sparked this philanthropic movement that, has now reached many other countries in the world. And tonight, I feel like the fact that we're supporting the Citizens Foundation through this event, it's another, let's say, testimony of the fact that we can all take a little bit of ownership when there's something that feels huge as a crisis, like, in this case, education crisis in Pakistan. I think it's exactly what we do in the day-to-day. We share ownership of this problem, and each and every one of us is, trying to be part of the solution. I know that Max and the organizers set up a fundraiser for us, so thank you, first of all, because, again, you thought of us in such an opportunity. And what I'm asking you is to, support us, take a little bit of that ownership with you tonight. And if you want, support us so that these kids, again, can stop waiting and finally, make their, lives, make their dreams come true. And, start having access, living opportunities as they deserve. I think there's a fundraiser being circulated. Maybe we can pin that link, Max, later on. But yeah, I wanted just to say thank you again. Please consider supporting TCF. And of course, if you need more information, I'll be here and happy to connect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Federico, please.
So the ambassador stole one of my questions before because I wanted to ask to AHMAD how the audience received the Islamabad production. But first of all, I have another question, which is the simplest and probably the hardest. Why Beckett? How did you get to Beckett?
Thank you so much, Federico, Max, Her Excellency. Thank you, Martha, whatever you're doing for our children here in Pakistan. And thank you for having me. Well, why Beckett? That's that's an interesting question, because Beckett is human. You have already answered it. I first discovered Beckett when I was a child. I read him for the first time. I didn't get it, of course, but then when I reread him in my undergrad degree, that was the time when I realized that yes, Beckett is. I mean, of course, he's Irish. He's French as well. He's Italian, but he is human, and that was something which occurred to me because while growing up, I mean, it was quite at a young age, but I could relate to what the experiences of those characters were. And then when I started studying him academically, particularly during my master's, when I had my thesis on the early plays of Beckett, that was the time when I realized, because I approached him as a first postmodernist and last modernist, but then I somehow realized that he's not, I mean, he's not the last modernist or first postmodernist. He's just human. That is something, because the suffering which is there, it's not just the suffering, but the human condition which is there. Each and every character is someone which you can find here in Pakistan, which you can find in Italy, which you can find in in Ireland. So that was something which and that is something which I rediscovered again when I was translating Waiting for Godot. I thought that it would be a difficult job to translate Waiting for Godot. It's a huge play, but when I started, I discussed this with Max as well. When I started translating it, I believe that the play translated itself. I didn't have to do much. That was something which fascinated me. That was really fascinating for me. That it was something that Beckett himself. I was reading one of his letters, and he himself mentioned that he somehow wants to strip meaning from language. He does not want to rely on language. That is something noticeable about Beckett. So if you translate him into Hindi or Bengali or French, even Urdu, you'd find the essence continued, carried in that very translation. So that is something which has fascinated me. And then, of course, I've read him academically. My undergrad thesis was on Beckett. My master's thesis was on Beckett. I've been teaching Beckett for the last 7 years now. So, of course, he's a personal favorite as well. I mean, that's something which is there. And as far as the play was concerned, it was received very well, actually. We had 4 shows here in PNCA, and all 4 of them were housefuls, actually. One thing which we did was that we had a very comic treatment to the existential crisis of the characters. We somehow kept it deliberately, like our director decided to keep it comic. So it was not slapstickish. I would not say that it was slapstick, but we had the physical comedy of Beckett. We somehow we tried to play with the physical comedy of it, and then we received great acclaim, actually, after the play. A lot of coverage from the media, and of course the audience, they absolutely loved it. Our production was quite long, by the way. We had like 2 hours 20 minutes playing directly, like continuously, and all the journal reviews were quite good, and we could hear the laughter throughout the play from the very start of it, when he's taking his boots off, Astragon Gogo, till the very end of it, when the boy arrives. Even the tragic part of it was received with laughter at times, because people, and that is something special about Beckett, that you do not realize how to react to Beckett. I mean, at times you do not know whether to laugh or whether to cry. That is the best part of it. So by the end of it, the monologues of Didi at that time, although they are quite tragic in a way, but we heard people laughing at that time as well. So the general experience of the people was that they enjoyed the play. They had never seen anything like this, by the way, in Pakistan before. It was very difficult for us to bring Beckett to stage for so many reasons. I will not be discussing them, but yeah, we took our time. We took 3 months, and when we saw people laughing, enjoying, and knowing Beckett, actually, yeah, that's something important as well. A lot of people here in Pakistan, they do not know who Samuel Beckett is. I mean, they have never heard of him, but when they saw the play, they had huge respect for Beckett, of course. So yeah, that was the overall experience, and Beckett is a personal favorite, so that's why.
I would love to watch the performance.
So we can
do not understand a word in Urdu, but how you tell it sounds great.
Our actors are, I believe that the credit goes to our actors. Some of them are here in this discussion as well. They actually performed it really well. They are trained actors professionally. They have degrees in acting. We have just one school here, one college here in Pakistan, which teaches acting. So they have like their degrees in acting. So they are trained actors. So they did justice. I mean, it's really hard to do justice to Beckett, but I mean, they did something. Yeah.
So I have another question for you, and then I pass the word to Max if he want to go on with the show. But I'm particularly curious about the Lucky monologue because I think it's the most difficult part to translate. It's mind blowing. It's very, very, very complex and quite nonsense, even if a sense of it you can find. So how did you approach the translation of that part of the script?
I believe when I reached Lucky's monologue or Lucky's speech, I call it. I just like calling it Lucky's speech. When I reached that part, I believe I already translated Gogo and Didi, so it was not that difficult for me. I believe Pozzo, I struggled with Pozzo more than anyone, by the way. Pozzo was very difficult to translate for me because of Pozzo is a bit this particular character. He is human, but the other side of human, I mean, I can't explain it. I think at times he acts like a god as well. So he's a god and a human. So for me, it was difficult to translate Pozzo, particularly in our context, in our language. Lucky was primarily easy. I just swapped the titles and the names with some local figures here, like all the titles, and then I included some local references here as well, some pseudo-religious references from our region. So I believe it was quite easy. I mean, Lucky's monologue in performance was quite tricky. I mean, of course it is, but in translation it was not that tricky for me because the only trick I had was to just swap the names and the religious references, and that was it. Yeah, but the performance was tricky. I believe our Lucky's here as well. I asked him to join, so he's here. He can even narrate some of a chunk of the monologue for you people. So Pozzo was difficult. Lucky was easy for me. I mean, I'm not sure why, but yeah.
Before going to our scholar, okay, to Liz, I would want to stay for a second on a topic that also over a few points we have been discussing, the two of us, many times, okay. Beckett writing in French, not going back to Ireland, okay, and Federico, that my position is that he was, no matter what, he was Irish, okay, and so on. But I would want to ask our two Irish, I was joking earlier, at least more Irish than me, for sure, Daniel and Ola, okay. What about the Irishnesses, plural probably, of Beckett, okay, and specifically to Ola, okay, you can have a conversation between the two of you if you want, okay, in this context today. And what about the other language? Because Beckett didn't probably like so much Gaeilge, but it's always there. It's always somewhere there, and there is this beautiful concept of the waiting, like something that is, again, in terms of the semantic of the word, is so powerful, okay, that paradoxically, waiting for Godot or Anatandan, but the concept there is closer, we had this conversation with AHMAD, closer to what the concept of waiting is in Urdu and what the concept of waiting is in Irish. So, Daniel and Ola, please, thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you, Max. It's interesting that you mentioned that Beckett wasn't too fond of Irish, because he does lament for Connemara in the monologue, the Lucky's monologue. And it's interesting, he talks a lot about nature and the Haunachta, and just there's a real repetition of nature and Connemara. So it's not clear to me how he felt about the language, to be honest. But there's something uncomfortable about the monologue. And I did study Waiting for Godot in my undergraduate as well. And I saw Endgame in the Abbey Theatre. And I've always found Beckett's work quite uncomfortable because we're not sure exactly what he's trying to communicate. There's a bit of confusion, and that's what a lot of us taught in my undergraduate when we had first studied Waiting for Godot. So there's definitely an essential crisis there. It's a train of thought, and I think a lot of us can maybe kind of relate to that in a sense as well. You know, maybe in a time where you're confused, maybe, for example, COVID, a time that a lot of people were confused and had different sort of thoughts as well. So it's something that a lot of us can reflect on, but maybe it is comforting as well, you know, the references to nature and Connemara, and maybe that was something that he felt he could find some lightness in. And I think for a lot of people, you know, that part of the country is a place where they can go and feel light and away from the heaviness or the bustling of Dublin city. So there's something comforting and relatable about it too, I think.
Yeah, and just to pick up from that point, I think in the kind of references to the scant references, I suppose, to Ireland that you might find within, there's maybe a grounding that comes almost prior to language in his writing. And I think, and as Alla said, I think, you know, Beckett is almost in a way resistant to interpretation, resistant to the creation of meaning, because I think when we as readers come with it, with these tools for meaning making, for interpretation, for understanding, it defies that. And I think part of that is because beneath those things, once you strip away these kind of tools of interpretation, there is a kind of something essential beneath there. You know, the things that unite us all beyond language. We all have doubts. We all have you know, kind of the fears of aging and the consequences of aging. We all wait for something, you know, we're all eternally waiting for something. And whether we apply kind of narratives of meaning in Irish or Italian or English or whatever, I think that's secondary. And I think the kind of essential humanity is something beneath that Beckett exposes. Sorry to ramble, but that's
I agree with you, Daniel. I'm just thinking there at the end of the monologue there, he mentions Ladog, he mentions tennis. And I'm thinking, is there a bit of a contrast there between Britishness and Irishness in a sense? Because, you know, he's talking about Connemara, then he's going into tennis. So, that's an interesting.
I think there's a real push and pull in the kind of different faces of Irishness that would have existed at the time.
Yeah. I think the tug of war between Irishness is, you know, Irish identity at the time, especially. You know, could even comment on today's Ireland as well, you know, the different Irishnesses. I know we've discussed this previously, Max, as well, and Laverno, you know, the new Irishnesses that are coming about today as well.
Thanks, Daniel. And Ola, I just try to go even deeper, okay, with you specifically. Again, this thing of the waiting. Okay, while waiting for Godot is, there is not the sea, okay? There is nothing like the sea in waiting for Godot. It's just this barren landscape, okay? But to me, it always reminded me of an island at the end of the day, okay? You are on the island, there is just one tree on the island, and there is nothing. But the nothing is the sea, so it's everything at the same time, okay? And you are waiting for something that should come back, or for the first time, from this huge nothingness or everythingness that is around you, okay? So I was curious because you are in charge on, when it comes to Gaelge, at least in this room, okay? I was curious about, again, what really intrigued me talking with my colleagues in TCF, with AHMAD, okay? This thing that the concept of waiting, in Urdu, okay? And AHMAD, feel free to, it's so strong, so pregnant, okay? This thing that waiting is a serious thing. It's not that I'm waiting for the bus, okay? I'm waiting for something important to happen. Is there such a thing in Irish? Because again, I have an extremely limited Gaelic, okay? But this thing of the waiting, for example, on plays, on novels, set on scripts even, okay, screenplays set on the Aran Islands, for example, okay? This thing that you wait, okay? And you could go from Synge to Martin McDonagh. There is this waiting, okay? Is there something in Irish as in Urdu that waiting is so an important thing, which is just to be clear, okay, it's just a way to reaffirm the Irishness of Beckett against Federico, okay? That's the only thing that I'm targeting with this, okay? Thanks, Ola. If you want to add, again, I'm extremely curious about this because what AHMAD and my colleague in TCF, okay, so their mother tongue is Urdu in this case. And this concept resonated so much with these waitings. You are on the cliff and you are waiting. You are almost to get the ticket to the States and you are waiting, okay, because you have to leave immigration and so on. Well, Ola, you can tell me, feel free to tell me that I am, chasing ghosts. Okay, that's fine.
No, not at all. No, it's a really interesting concept there. And I think maybe politically, the language has been waiting for a long time to be recognized. At first, it was seen as the language of the poor. Now, somehow, it's seen as a language of the affluent. So it's very up and down. We're constantly waiting, maybe as Irish speakers, for recognition. For example, in the North, for Irish language rights as well. So it's a constant pull, I think, as well. And it's interesting that we're talking about waiting in this context of Beckett as well. I'm not familiar with any particular context outside of that in the Irish language about waiting. Ekfa looks like you have in the poster there. But I did think it was interesting that one of the most renowned Irish language writers, Alan Titley, had written a drama or a play about Hagen Godot. So if Godot had actually come, and that was all in New York. I haven't seen it myself, but I think that's really interesting kind of reply on the play as well. But yeah, outside of that, I wouldn't be too familiar, but I think there's a stillness maybe about the language. I think when you go to the Gaeltacht, there's something calming. It feels like, I know that language is at challenging times at the moment in the Gaeltacht, but I think when people go there, there's a stillness that, everything has stayed the same way. So you kind of are ekfanacht, you are waiting, but maybe you're waiting for the rest of the country to kind of get up to speed and appreciate the language as well. So yeah, it's interesting in that sense, I think.
Thanks, Ola. Thanks, Daniel. And Liz. So
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Please. Yeah, go ahead, guys, please.
Sure, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing event on behalf of the Samuel Beckett Society, who I'm representing, and which is there absolutely to foster global connections around the world and between scholars and theatre practitioners and creative artists and translators. And all those things are really vibrant, I think, in the society at the moment. So this is just an amazing event. It's a sort of event that really reflects our values and our priorities. So it's just wonderful to have a seat at the table here. And I feel that the conversation has been so resonant and rich so far. I'm really enjoyed your insights. Waiting is, when to lay bare power inequalities in societies, look at who is waiting. I think this is such a kind of important and revealing concept and experience. Martin Luther King had a
speech, which should be as well known, I think, as the more famous one, perhaps, called "Why We Can't Wait." You know, thinking about the idea that, you know, that temporizing, as he calls it, you know, sort of being internalizing this sort of virtue of patience, you know, was such a problematic thing for those waiting for civil rights. You know, and this speaks to some of the things that we've sort of been talking about already. You know, that this was that kind of giving different kinds of value and kind of creating an ideology of sort of waiting and patience, you know, to mask and to perpetuate, in fact, structural inequalities in all sorts of contexts. Waiting, you know, the famous staging of Godot in New Orleans, you know, after Hurricane Katrina, where people were waiting for aid, were waiting for help, for succor that wasn't arriving, that didn't arrive at all in some cases. And sort of were at the mercy of natural forces, but also were absolutely at the mercy of structural forces. You know, so I think that, you know, look to who is waiting, and, you know, 0 hours contracts, as you know, as we call them in the UK, people who are working precariously and at the behest of employers, very much like Vladimir and Estragon, who are absolutely having to wait by the phone or by their computer all day, every day, until some work drops into their laps. You know, there's a book called Non-Stop Inertia, which shows the sort of frenziedness of that kind of culture, but also the paralysis of that kind of culture. And I think Beckett really speaks, you know, he's so, this kind of amazing trifecta of kind of suffer, you know, the attention to suffering, you know, and he said, you know, he said to Anatik, you know, that people kind of think he must have had a miserable childhood, and I think he did in some ways, but also he says, you know, it's all you have to do is go to the window or read the papers and it's all there. You know, he's so attentive, he's a kind of radar for all the suffering of the world, but at the same time he's writing this very funny text, and the sort of the way that he reconciles those things is to have this kind of level of abstraction. You know, Vladimir saying we are men, that sense of being, you know, of the moon, you know, writing from the perspective of the moon, you know, if you remember in Godot, pale for weariness, looking at the likes of us, you know, that kind of that kind of existential sort of perspective on what's happening. So it's a really strange magic trick. There was in the UK the Adrian Dunbar's documentary was screened last night, Searching for Sam, where he's exploring Samuel Beckett's background and history and culture. And he talked about this way, you know, his encounter with Beckett as a student and as a student actor, and how there was this abstraction at the same time as this incredible compassion, and he couldn't work out how these things were relating, you know, were sort of somehow there at the same time and working in tandem and for each other rather than against each other. And I think that's, you know, it's a very, very interesting thing. And I think one of the things that what the ambassador was talking about earlier is really the idea of this as a play, you know, or the idea of the possibility of a play as something that brings people together, and that allows people, I think, to feel waiting, to live waiting. You know, the audience are really uncomfortable in this play. You know, I think Ola was sort of touching on that. We're really uncomfortable with the experience of waiting in this very sort of ill-defined way. You know, Beckett famously talking to Peter Hall, the new, at that point, wet behind the ears British director of the first production of Godot, and, you know, Beckett comes to him and poor old Peter Hall, you know, Beckett says it's fine, you know, which must just have been absolutely crushing. But he says it's fine, and you know, he didn't know that from Beckett that's probably high praise, but he talked about, you know, you must make the pauses longer, you must bore the audience. In this famous line, you know, and Hall says later on, you know, this is dangerous country for the theatre. You know, this is breaking all the rules of theatre. This is breaking the contract of what theatre, you know, sets out to be. But it's, you know, that's, in a sense, that's the way in which he really revolutionizes theatre. He uses the space of the theatre. We're all trapped in it. And he uses the time of the theatre, that there's nothing outside of the text and the stage. You know, there's no background. We don't know. All of the plays are menaced by time, by ending. You know, and we are living that experience of waiting in this very sort of experiential way. Sorry, that's way too much talking, but thank you so much for so many things.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, buzzing in my
Thanks,
head.
Elizabeth. Just a very practical question to you is, I can guess you have tons of questions for Ahmed. Okay, would you want to pick one question from you to Ahmed about his production is using Urdu for and on Beckett?
For me to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so fascinated by what you were saying about Pozzo, and that, you know, is this a language of power that isn't speakable in some sense? You know, this kind of you know, the kind of boorish aggression in that role, or the kind of loftiness of that role. I don't know. I was really fascinated I don't know if you could say any more about that. And if there are any other sort of moments which just eluded translation. But you know, yeah, I don't know if there's any more to say about Pozzo, but it was fascinating to me.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. Thank you, Max. Yeah, of course, Pozzo. I mean, as you said, that Urdu, whether Urdu is the language of power or not, I believe Urdu is not the language of power. If you look at Urdu literature in general and then the technicality of Urdu, you'd find Urdu more of a romantic language rather than the language of power. It is very difficult. I mean, when it comes to showing aggression or power through Urdu. So yeah, I believe that you accurately pointed it out, that why Pozzo was difficult for us. As far as waiting is concerned, again, waiting is something very much romanticized here in our region, as well as in Urdu literature in general. I believe it was because of the early Urdu poets, such as if you people might have heard of Mirza Ghalib or Mir Taqi-Mir. You know, these are the classic Urdu poets. They have romanticized the idea of waiting, because waiting is something, it is primarily used in love lyric, love poetry, in Urdu literature, the idea of waiting, because it has this paradoxical nature to it. Waiting is something which is very uncertain. You are not sure about things. You do not know whether something which you would want, or whether you want someone to come or something to happen, whether it would happen or not. So there is this uncertainty to it. But then again, that uncertainty is countered by the hope of it happening. There is this uncertainty, and then there is this hope. I believe this paradoxical nature of waiting, which is present in Urdu literature, is something which we people here in Pakistan, we can relate to uncertainty as well, and hope, because I mean, you know, the uncertainty is here for a very long time now in our region. But then again, that uncertainty, or rather the hope to counter that uncertainty, has made us resilient. I believe we people are quite resilient. Pakistani people, they in general are resilient people. And this is something which I can relate to Beckett as well. I find, you know, all the characters of Beckett quite resilient. I mean, they never give up on anything. None of them. Crab would not give up on, you know, recording himself, and Winnie would not give up on enjoying the happy day. And of course, same goes for Clove and Ham and everyone. They know it for certain. I mean, they are not even uncertain about Gogo and Didi. They are not uncertain that Godot would not come. I mean, they're quite sure that he's not about to come. Yet they do not give up on the idea of waiting for him. That is something. I mean, I also, it somehow occurred to me. I remembered Edward Bond's Saved, when he talks about Len, this character in Saved, Len, that he's a optimistic character, because he never gives up on people when they are at their lowest. So I believe Gogo and Didi are at their lowest at the end, not just at the end, but throughout the whole play. Same goes for Ham. Ham starts, his play that there is no misery loftier than mine. Yet none of them would give up on whatever they want, whatever they are waiting for. So that very hope which is there in Beckett in general, not just Godot, but Beckett. So that hope is something which I can relate to. Our region can relate to. We people are resilient because we are uncertain but hopeful. So yeah, that's why I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on Ahmad's point there. I thought it was very interesting, the point you made about hope. And you can bring this into language as well, especially minority languages, because there's something fighty about them, their hope to stay, their hope to continue to exist. And you see that in Irish language. To some extent, you can see that in indigenous languages as well, in Nigeria as well, but particularly with Irish, because I think it has endured a lot. And given that it's right beside the UK as well, it's a very interesting relationship, I think, between the two countries. And, I sit on the board of directors with Forest Naguelga, a company really to promote the Irish language, and it was brought together in 1998 after the Good Friday Agreement as well. So even there, the hope to continue to get funding to fund Irish language projects, to continue to, to engage people with the language as well on the island and elsewhere as well. And that's the thing. I think it's a language of hope in terms of integration as well. I think I see that a lot with a lot of new communities coming into the language. You can see a group like Céim Míle Fáilte, 100,000 Welcomes. It was a group set up by Conor Naguelga to help, I suppose, integrate people from new communities coming into Ireland to the Irish language. And personally for me as well, the language was like hope for me. Started in all Irish school in 2000, very new to the country, immigration at that time. So yeah, I think it's a real beautiful thing to see empathy and language, connect together. And that's the reason myself and Daniel as well started off the Scale. But yeah, I think that's really it's been really interesting to kind of discuss that context within Lucky's monologue as well, to see how it can reflect to different kinds of people. Because while we're waiting, we want hope, and that's where the resilience comes from.
Thanks, Ola. Okay, just a quick note to Muhammad. I saw you were raising your hand. If you want to input your question on the chat, and the same if you have any other question. Muhammad, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Saeed. I just have a question for Ahmed. I just wanted to know that when you were producing Waiting for Godot, unfortunately, I don't know when it was produced, but now I'm realizing that. So have you watched Anwar Jaffrey's Inusha Ke Intezar Mein, and it's been translated into Sindhi, and then it's been translated from French to Urdu by Zahid Naz? Have you got the idea that how they have translated and what's different in your production? Because particularly I'm interested that how did you translate Waiting for Godot into Urdu, or it remained as it is? For example, Anwar Jaffrey changed it into Insha Ka Intezar, particularly religious and political, and Zahid Naz kept it as it is. And as far as academic discourse are concerned, they translate it for the students. But Sindhi production and Urdu production and yours production, I just want to see that whether you have watched them, read the translation, and how your production is different, in particular the context of Pakistan and particularly the sensitivity that we generally have in our country. Thank you. And thank you for everyone listening to me. And
thanks.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Saeed. Thank you. Quite accurate Again, yes, of course, I saw Insha Ke Intezar Mein. In fact, this was something which I was discussing with Federico that day as well, that I believe he assumed that I'm the first Urdu translator. I clarified to him that I'm not the first Urdu translator. In fact, it has been translated into Urdu and, in Sindhi as well as Punjabi as well. Yeah, I've read the Punjabi version, but I'm not familiar with Sindhi, so I've not read that one. But I know Insha Ke Intezar Mein, I've seen that one as well. I believe the one in which Salim Miraj played Go. So I've seen that one. Yeah. So our production was quite different from that one, by the way. I mean, a lot of people gave us this. Those people who already knew Godot, when they came to watch our production, they were quite amazed or rather fascinated for the fact that they did not find it quite philosophical, maybe. I mean, it was philosophical, but we did not present it in a way. We rather, because we had this idea that this is something new for our audience. So what, particularly people in Islamabad. So what we did, we somehow played, as I've already mentioned, that we played with the slapstick, or rather the physical comedy of Beckett. There is a lot of physical comedy in Beckett. I mean, in each and every play. So we somehow played with that. Our director was quite particular about that. That if they have to pick Pozzo up, when they're picking Pozzo up, they would pick him, you know, from angles. They would rather, you know, drag him from his feet, and even if they have to exchange their hats and the carrots and everything. So we played with the physical comedy of it. Insha Ke Intezar Mein, the one you mentioned, I believe the vocabulary of it is quite literary. It is very, I'm not sure whether what to call it, literary or heavy. I would rather say it has a heavy technical literary vocabulary to it. Our vocabulary, or rather our translation, was quite it was quite relatable for the younger audience, I would rather say. I did not go for heavy Urdu words. I rather kept it quite simple. I mean, I've some clips. I can share it with you, Saeed. You can see that. And then our selling point was that we presented, I mean, of course, it's a tragic comedy. We played with the comedy of Beckett. I have always found Beckett more humorous than tragic. So this is something which I believe. So I played with the comedy of Beckett, and we made people laugh. So that's why Insha Ke Intezar Mein is very tragic. It is a bit slow. Our was fast paced when it came to the delivery of dialogues, but then we played with the pauses as well. So it was comic, it was contemporary, and yeah, and physical as well.
Thank you, AHMAD. So, do we have time for another question?
For another question, and then we will try something. And again, if we fail, we are going to fail spectacularly because it's an experiment. We are going to try. But before getting to the grand finale, if someone else wants to ask to the panel, so any of our guests, anything, please go ahead. Do not be shy. And as you see in the chat, the fundraising is open. I was just answering a message. Said, we are going to work in post-production to the video, so we are going to have the recording set on the Italish Magazine YouTube channel. And again, you have all my contacts. This is only the beginning, okay? Ahmed is here because he doesn't know what I'm going to ask him next, okay? Because other than that, he would have fled, and you know, this thing would have never happened. But yeah, that's it. So, Said, we are going to talk. Feel free to contact me, and we are going to have the recording as soon as we will be able to manage it.
So Max, I would like to say something to how do you say, recap everything. So, okay, wrap it up. Yeah, we had a lot of great writers coming from the 20th century, but every one of them, less or much, is linked to his historical context and to his own cultural background. Beckett is the only one, in my opinion, which is completely universal, purely universal. And what we're doing today is a proof that that this is the truth. And this is why nowadays still a lot of visual artists, musical composers, dancers are inspired by Beckett's work. I think it's the only one who can do that. It's not, I don't want to make a rating of who is the first one, but this is one of these very peculiarity.
And I think that you are preaching to the choir here. So, you know, it's, yeah. We are slightly biased towards the old side.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, just to come in, sorry, just to come in
Please.
there quickly, we did mention Martin McDonagh. I recently saw Pillow Man at the Gate, a fascinating play, and I know, Daniel, that's one of your most favourite playwrights, Irish playwrights. If you'd like to speak on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just that it obviously McDonagh has his own play, Skull and Connemara, which we'll see referenced in Lucky's monologue. So obviously there's a connection there of these, the kind of universal appeal of Beckett, you know, that he's touched so many, and I think he has such a great legacy in Irish theatre that, yeah, I think it's almost impossible to not see the threads of where his writing has gone and how many people it's affected, you know. But yeah, I think that's a good point too.
I agree. I think that Martin McDonagh is as close to Beckett as you can be. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you will never be Beckett. Okay. But yeah, to another episode of this series. Okay. Now, the grand finale, again, it's an experiment. It could be a massive failure, or maybe it's going to be what I hope. So, Daniel, Ola, and Ahmed, get ready, okay, warm up. Before getting there, let me thank Her Excellency, the Ambassador. I can't be sure if she is still with us, but thank you so much for the support. Liz, we are going to talk very soon about a number of things, okay, and I hope that again, you know, the scholar, okay, you know what I meant, okay, also, okay, the fact that it is important in this context, okay, that if the audience and the scholar agree that we did something that makes sense, okay, it's just something to be proud of, okay? So I hope that it made sense for you as much for the rest of the audience. And to everybody, remember that the fundraising is up and running, and it will be linked also to the recording. So the link will be up and running also on YouTube as soon as we get there. And again, you have my contact, you have the social media outlets, you have everything. So if you are curious about what we are going to do next, okay, just drop us a message. Marta, do you want, before we go for the grand finale, to wrap it up in terms of how we ended up here tonight?
It starts from connections with you, Max, and now we're talking about Beckett. We are in Pakistan and we are trying to support the Citizens Foundation. So I guess if you can continue this good work, consider supporting us, and, you know, stay in touch. I'm sure like a lot of good connections will start from tonight, and hopefully, again, in our case, less children will be waiting for their future to, you know, take place and come concrete. So thank you, everyone.
You're very welcome. So it was another happy day, okay? And I am quoting
Max.
Okay, so
Where the deadline
Vila Shana Sehe Culture Stanley August
the air is the same, and the earth, the earth,
Van meets Trumpushi,
like
Michelle Gullis Tullis the Hair Culture Steadily got Speecham in the Wilderness
600
Mark
air,
Harry
the earth above the stones,
Question Farga
great
Question
seas, great
Anna
cold,
Ishkara
the sea,
Tillaraha
land, and the air I
Bear
was in.
Margana Others and Shillam
Quite
Olive
the
Marathon Tear
there,
Others and Shillam Olive
Malas, on in the short
Tear
time.
Others and Olive Arch
Out of
Conahan
stones,
the Globe
I resume.
More
But
Ferrier
so fast, I resume the scope shrinks and wastes and concurrently simultaneously.
Tear
What is more, much more, for reasons unknown, in spite of the tennis on the flame, tears,
Olive, Arch Conahan the Globe Snook, Down More, Seville, More, Tear,
and
Husig May, Akushna Ahaneja, in Ahmel Nalamoga, Fair King Shin, in Shon Fee,
banded and finished the skull
a
on a
Husig
marrow.
May, Career, I,
The skull, alas, the stones.
Dara, I, Arch Conahan the Glook,
The
K,
stones.
Datuk, Iris, and Air. Husig May, Achni Ko Gasta Shin, Husig May and Cliggan a dull leg, Agus ag an arm, Kayla Har Shin, a Hushna Ahanija in Achnona, Ladoga, Aig, and Asog, and the Lastraca, the Jora, the Gluckum, Kogurm Shin, Kokun Shin, Ferrier, Aig, and Cliggan, and Godamara in Achnon, the Ladoga, and the Seher Tragan, Neat Nar Creekniak, Nice Chumkushi, Fos Arch Conahan, the Gluck, Ivoclawan, Husig May, Ferrier, Treka, Na Creeknaha, and Clickin, and Godamara, and Ahno, and Ladoga, and Clickin, Ferrier, and the Clucka, Cunard, Ladog, the Clucka, Kokun, Cunard, Na Creeknaha.
Well, guys, this was at the same time in Irish and in English.
तेहरान और लबनान में जब से हजरत अल्लामा और वही के जिनके दम से इल्म को हयात है कि जब अपना इल्म इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो उसमें बहुत सारे अवामिल कार फरमा होते हैं, एक लफ्ज़ सब इधर से उधर कर देता है और ये हिसाब किताब अच्छा है और ये किताब हिसाब भी ठीक है और हिसाब किताब के बगैर आप बगैर किसी वजह के मिस्र के बादशाह ने भी तो चाहे हकीकत कुछ भी हो इस बात के कतई नज़र और बिला लिहाज की जब सोचा जाए और जाना जाए और इंसान ने क्या खोया और क्या पाया और मीर और मीर की हकायत की रोशनी में ज्यादा नुकसान मुतवक्के है कि अब जितने भी दरिया और अंधेरा और जहां जमीन काली है और रोशन और चकिल है कि जहां अफसोस के हमारे आका और उनके उस साल की कहानी के अफसोस कि अब सिर्फ जमीन है जहां पत्थर और अंधेरा और रोशनी और मुकम्मल अंधेरा के जहां समंदर की गहराई और पहाड़ की ऊंचाई और जहां कुछ भी नहीं वहां फिजा में अब जमीन पर और समंदर पर और अफसोस सुनो कि अब मैं दोबारा बताऊंगा कि हॉकी और डंडे और क्रिकेट और चटिल जमीन और फिर जमीन के ऊपर पहाड़ बगैर किसी वजह के क्या अफसोस मैं दोबारा शुरू करूंगा कि एक ही लम्हे में एक ही बार में सारे का सारा एक साथ इकट्ठे और पत्थर और पहाड़ और दरिया और उनकी रवानी और खेले जाने वाले तमाम खेल के हॉकी और कबड्डी और अफसोस कि अब एक लाश और इंसान की तमाम मेहनत और मुशक्कत सब जाया है कि अब वक्त सब साबित कर देगा कि बगैर किसी वजह और जुर्म के कि मैं दोबारा बताऊंगा कि कैसे मिस्र और अहराम और तेहरान और लबनान और कैसे कुस्तुनतुनिया में अफसोस के एक लाश और क्रिकेट और उसके बावजूद और पत्थर और दरिया और कबड्डी और अफसोस और एक लाश और कुस्तुनतुनिया और मिर्जा और पत्थर और क्रिकेट और नातमाम और मीर और नातमाम. Thank you.
Good night, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Garmani.
you. Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy birthday, Sam.
Happy birthday, son.